We'll call this meeting of
Where do you do that?
Water Authority to order. It's September 14th. A different day for us, typically Tuesdays. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held August 20th?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Everybody on line there able to hear at this point?
Chief Noise, can you hear us?
If you can't hear, don't say it.
Jan?
This is Susie, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, item number 2, airport vouchers totaling $432,726.30. Motion to approve.
Motion. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We have individual vouchers A through E.
Motion.
We have a second.
Is this for, like for the Flint Group, is that for services already rendered?
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item number 4, the July financials, were added late into the packet. Any discussion or questions?
What you'll see is a change that we've taken depreciation out. That's a non-cash expense. That's the first thing usually you do when you get the financials is deduct depreciation from your expenses to get the actual. So depreciation is out. Chat with Brady Marks, a little bit with legal is important, and we did remove that. So you'll see the revenues over expenses were a little more accurate in terms of what the actual cash ones are. The variance on the revenue is just with the ongoing CARES, the ARPA grants, still the COVID grants that came in. Everything else seems to be on track. Jet Center revenue was up a little higher than what was budgeted. Interest revenue was a little higher than what was budgeted. That's parking revenue. So those are really the 3 outliers plus the COVID grants.
The timing on the grant dollars, we're nearing year end here. Are we confident that they're gonna come through, or are we gonna have significant changes to our?
So yesterday, Stacy and I just accepted what's called Grant 58, but it's really an offshoot of Grant 49, which was the CARES grant. And that grant is to reimburse us for projects that have been completed. So that grant will be $10,583,385. That wasn't budgeted this year just because of the timing of when the FAA was going to do the development addendum. So we should be receiving those funds sometime at the end of this month. And then the remaining amount of the CARES grant, which is a little over just under $3 million, we should have sometime before December 31st or in the mid part of January, depending on when the FAA allows us to do the next addendum, which should be sometime after October 1st, Jeff, does that sound right?
That's correct.
Okay, the 10 million you just mentioned was not in the budget for this year.
Correct.
Okay, of the dollars that were in the budget that we haven't received, how do we?
They were on the expense side. So, but these are projects that go back into, gosh, how far back, Jeff? 2020, just after CARES with the development addendum?
Yeah, they're 2020, 2021.
3 years of different expenses that can be recovered.
By year end, you think we'll be back on budget intergovernmental revenue then?
Yes.
Because we're significantly off at this point.
I mean, in terms of, well, it's gonna be more because of the
Right.
development addendum.
Yeah, and it may seem odd, but I'm just concerned about being over budget as under budget at the same time. The other item that you brought up is interest revenue. And are we seeing the interest revenue pick up from dollars invested with PFM?
There is some there, and also with First International Bank, we're at 4.5% now in all funds there, and I think we're gonna go to 4.75 if the board at First International approves that today. So,
Well, I know we're anticipating spending down some of the cash reserves with the 47 to 50 million in cash reserves that we're carrying it might make sense now after. So trying the first year with PFM to look at increasing the allocation to PFM when the interest rates, rate structure is such as it is right now.
We're actually, getting more interest now at First International than we are with PFM. Some of those investments, just how they were left.
Yep. But I think what we need to do is that, we started with 20 million there, and we should be looking at that and comparing, and we could probably move that up another 10 or 15, 20 million to again continue to drive interest revenue at this point. The other one that I was interested in was, it appears parking revenue is running significantly above budget. It looks to be about 1.3 million over budget. And as we're looking at cash flows for terminal expansion, parking garage going forward, how that would impact, because we had budgeted 6.7 million based on the lower run rate of this year. So we may want to make sure that we're tying back into that.
The reason the parking revenue was over is because when the 2023 budget was set, like in July of last year, then the board approved a rate increase in October. So the revenues weren't picked up in the budget that was approved at that time. So it's a good thing. Just speaking of parking, I don't know if Greg Pearson is on, but if you see the capacity right now in the short-term lot, we're running probably 80-85% capacity a night. We need to do a rate increase. We're at 19 now. We should put that up another $1 or $2. Because what's happening is the meters and greeters that come here every day are parking way out by the exit plaza just to come in and pick somebody up and go because. So I think that's telling us that the demand or the value of the short-term lot still, we haven't hit that price point where it should be increased.
Well, I think as we continue to plan the parking garage, we'll need to take a serious look on the construction schedule of the short-term parking and the impact of revenue as we go through that process. And I would just throw out here for everybody to start thinking about right now. If you look at the parking revenue audit that's provided between meetings here, the one thing that jumps out is the sort of employee parking lot, which is a combination of a number of different things. Similar in size to our short-term lot, only generated $9,000 in revenue from that period. And as we look at this, I think we need to be very, very critical in our thinking during a garage construction project. If we could move the employee parking further to the south and keep the revenue producing short-term lot using that existing lot. So I know people aren't gonna like it, wanna get people upset and move their parking spots, but during this whole project, it's something I think that we need to consider. And then going forward, trying to understand the employee lots and the revenue being produced there. Are we kind of cross-subsidizing parking across other fields there? And so that's just something that as we look at this and start looking through to next year, I think we have to be prepared and need to look at it. And I would ask Greg with SP Plus to take a look at that if he's on, and see what we could do as far as swapping those out during construction.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I guess I'd ask a question about that. It's deemed a benefit for those employees. And I'm guessing any of us here, do you park at the Fargo Dome and walk to your office, or any of us do that? Most of the employees, you want that to be easy, convenient. I think it's a benefit for them, and I'd be concerned taking it away. I understand there's an impact monetarily, but it is a benefit for them. And I'd be very careful to take or consider taking it away.
And that's where we get some cross-subsidization. It's that if we look at this, that what you're talking about is some of the vendors in their leases have parking spaces. And if we're subsidizing, where's that revenue really identified? And if we're giving away parking cheaply to enhance lease revenue, we just need to understand that we look at that. But, and of course, any contractual obligations we have to deal with. But I suspect that it's not specifically identified parking spaces 1 through 25 per leases that are provided in here. If you look at shopping centers, if you look at retail, and you see where employees park, it's typically around the perimeter. There's still access to the parking, but again, I think we have to be careful as an authority. If we're gonna inconvenience people during this project, the last people we wanna inconvenience is our customers. And so customers first, and understand the value of the employees and everything else, but we may have to look at that a little differently.
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess if any employee ever watches this and hears we're okay in inconveniencing our employees, it's probably hard to hire people if that's what they're hearing from us. I'd be concerned about that.
I would expect our employees would be concerned about inconveniencing customers also.
Yes, I understand, but we're specifically talking about an area over here. And again, it's an employee perk, it's a benefit, it also helps us retain people too. So I just don't want to lose thought of that or lose sight of that as well.
So one thing about that employee lot, and I think Joan probably has a greater understanding of this, is there's multiple employee groups that park there. It's not just Hector employees, it's, the pilots and flight attendants that commute out of our location that are able to park very reasonably and, close to the airport, in probably one of the better situations for most flight crews of anybody that I've ever talked to. But those, I would leave my car sometimes for 2 weeks at a time, and could it be in an adjacent but a little bit further away from the terminal? I think that's realistic.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm not so sure we're doing a parking ramp yet. So, I'm like, and I don't really want this to be where we're gonna debate parking. This whole project's gonna be inconvenience for everyone.
Yep.
And I think from a staff standpoint, they need to figure out those priorities, and obviously some people that are working from 8 to 5 every day, maybe that's not as critical as people that are in and out every day. But getting back to the budget, I guess I just have really one question for Sean. And so that is, based on these July financials, are we on track with our budget for 2023?
We are, revenues.
Okay, so that's my only question. So, my goal here is that if we're not tracking with what our budget is, that you bring that up and we deal with it. And the challenge we have here is you've got all kinds of different numbers that are coming in and going out, and I just want to know that it ties in with our budget and kind of where we're going. So the other two things that I have that are budget related is I really need to know, I think we should have an update on the terminal cash flow. I know we had one several months ago.
It's coming today.
Okay, and then also on the parking ramp. Here we are in October, or almost in October, and I think that was kind of one of our things is to get this information. And I see some of these numbers are coming in a lot higher than I anticipated, and so I'm just really concerned that if we're north of 40,000, this thing's not gonna work. So I would say be specific would be, I think going forward, at least once a month, we should look at this cash flow for the terminal, how it changes. We should have sources and uses for each of these projects, so we know what's been committed to for dollars, what hasn't, kind of where we are on that. So cash flow on terminal and parking ramp and sources and uses.
Okay.
Yep. I would move to receive the July financials.
Second.
Motion and a second. I just would note that we are starting to slip a little bit behind again in the financials. That we don't want those starting to move out 60 days. These are the July financials for mid-September. A motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 5 is the update on the passenger terminal expansion and modification. We have Mead Hunt, we also have Leibowitz and Horton. I will tell you, I object strenuously to receiving big spreadsheets the morning of the meeting. And, would just ask that Mead Hunt or Leibowitz and Horton, that these be shared in advance of the meeting. There's a lot of information. I know you're gonna go through this, but.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
as a reminder, you did that to us several meetings ago, so I appreciate it. But when they get the data and give it to us, we want it as soon as we can get it, so. You presented us a number of spreadsheets too, and I understand it's short order, but it's been both ways, so.
Well, it's really ridiculous to talk about that, Brett. So,
Sir, I don't think it is. If you're able to do it and then reprimand someone else for doing it, that's not fair order.
I don't understand. If you'd like to go to a specific example and just want to touch on one.
A number of meetings we had, you brought spreadsheets right at the last minute and said, here's what we got. And so that happens, we understand that. And as we have this and it's presented, we can talk about it, that's great. I just get concerned we reprimand someone for doing it when it was done to us and we had that happen before. So
Well,
good governance would be we are consistent.
well, given that, would you like to make a motion to delay this?
No,
Would you like to do anything?
no, I was just commenting on your prior statement.
Okay, so it's just a complaint.
No, it's an observation, sir.
Okay. All right, do we have Leibowitz and Horton on also?
Yep, you, Monica,
Steve.
Monica and Steve are both online here.
Yeah, first two.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. So we have a lot of information to go through. Yes, we apologize for bringing this forth. It was a lot of information to pull together in relatively short order, but printing it out. We'll also have it on the screen for you to reference, and any follow-up questions down the line or after the meeting, we are certainly available to.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. What are you looking for us on this report? Are you looking for a decision from us at the end of the day, or is this just information?
Yeah, so at the end of this presentation, our goal is to get direction from the board on what we want to do budget-wise, because we're going to show you some budget options. Right now, where we're at the end of design development, and where the estimates came in at, and then what that means for us budget-wise.
Sure.
So I'll be looking for from the board direction on if we want to hold budget, if we want to go to where the current increase the budget to where it is now.
So I would say two things. One, let's try and get to that as quick as we can in this discussion. And second of all, again, if you're expecting a decision from us, then this is short term. And I don't know if, regardless how good your presentation is, if I'm comfortable in making a big decision. So I'm just planning that. So I guess for anyone else that's here, if you're coming here looking for decisions from our committee, then we need to be understanding and feel really comfortable with those decisions prior to that. So again, just use your judgment on that.
Okay, yeah, understood. The priority is to get this information out in front of you. It would be ideal to get a decision today, but I understand it's a lot of information that we're covering today, so if you need time to absorb it, we certainly are good with that. So, yes, so getting right to the point, we're going through the financial updates today based on the latest design and budget estimates that you have seen. This will lead into updates in the terminal funding plan, which references, Rick, what you were getting at earlier. So it's gonna be, I'm gonna present our current budget where we're at. And then Steve Horton with Leibowitz and Horton is gonna go through the financial implementation plan that has been put together then since the planning effort.
Can everybody see the PowerPoint that's coming up?
Stacy, can you see it?
You just have these two sheets. What were you saying?
Stacy?
I can, yep, I can see you.
Thank you.
One thing before we start, who are the participants of what this is?
Myself and Steve Horton.
Okay, it's just
Yep.
one Steve.
And then we have Albert McGuff here, is here to answer any questions that you might have regarding the specific construction budget timeline.
Okay, and your input was from, where'd we get our input from?
The input would be from, we have a professional cost estimators, Concord,
Okay.
and then we also have McGuff putting
Okay.
cost estimates
Yep.
together.
And then our revenues and sources are from Sean.
From Leibowitz, yep, Sean, Leibowitz and Horton, and Tom Schauer, who is with Mead Hunt, helping facilitate the funding effort.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, so when we went through this, so we can go to here. So we have procured two, as I mentioned, two budget estimates based on the DD, design development set. One from a professional cost estimating consultant, which is Concord, and then the other from McGuff. The team has gone through some initial reconciliation between the two estimates, but they're about 1.1% apart from each other, and this is a good indicator that both estimates reflect the current construction industry's cost climate. The estimates were assembled based on direct conversations and drawing reviews from the vendors and subcontractor, which further supports their accuracy for a DD level estimate. And when we completed schematic design, we held to a budget of about $106 million, which is construction and soft costs. And that budget was created at the time of our terminal area study and held close, but it chipped away at our contingency as we went through schematic design. The latest milestone, design development, our estimates come in at $118.5 million, and this is about 11.5% over original budget. Next slide. So why did the cost increase? When we first assemble budget estimates, there's numerous assumptions are made. All of us can agree that construction projects are unique in their own way. We set aside contingencies in an attempt to absorb these unknowns. But in our case, there are about three factors that pushed cost estimate, cost of our project in the upward direction. One was the scope additions. Through conversations and design development, we learned from day-to-day pain points of the airport admin staff and user groups. So such conversations evolved into additional project scope, such as like an additional passenger elevator, baggage carousel replacements, the extent of existing passenger boarding bridge refurbishing, restaurant concessions build-outs, and then the extent of HVAC and electrical equipment and replacement of the switchovers. So another factor that affects the budget is how long it'll take the contractor to build a project. It can be difficult to a difficult target to hit until you really get into the weeds. Where one airport may have the capacity and space to complete in two phases, another airport might require 6 phases. So phasing of the project is developed through a mix of existing mechanical electrical system downtime, switchover, and degree of inconvenience in airport that passengers and users are willing to endure, and the alignment throughout the schedule of weather throughout the schedule. And it's also important to have a level of redundancy during the construction process to keep operations moving. And then the last factor, which in itself wouldn't have had a large effect on our budget, but coupled with the former two, it moves the needle. And that's the demand of materials and resources continue to outweigh the supply. Cost increases have slowed down, but it still continue to rise at a more predictable rate now. Next slide. So we put together 3 options to consider. Me and Hunt McGuff went through and identified over 80 DE items to consider.
80 what?
Value engineering items to consider to, bring this back in to maintain the existing budget. But we wanted to bring it in front of the board. We didn't want to just assume that you want us to cut scope and keep moving at that budget. So we put together kind of 2 or 3 options here. One, the first is to just increase the budget to what the current DD estimate is. That's maintaining the scope and design direction. I think we'll still see at least $2 to $3 million in potential savings just through the items that we identified in this list, just because it makes sense. But any delta in that, if we increase it to 12 million and it only came in at, in the end at 9 million, that automatically goes into the owner contingency anyway. So it would just be more money set aside for this project or any other project that the airport might need. The second option is increasing the budget by 8 million. Just a few items that would be affected by that is reducing the scope of the first floor restroom model, omitting or reducing the ceiling baffles in select areas, and or changing the concourse structure to steel versus timber. And then you'd also be compromising on some of the energy efficient equipment, HVAC equipment, reducing tiles on the walls and floors. If we want to try to maintain the existing budget, this would include what I just mentioned, but removing the baffles and wood structure and departure areas, cutting back the scope of the existing terminal renovation, and then reusing HVAC and electrical equipment that still demonstrates some useful life. The challenge with this option will be mitigating the contrast between the existing and the addition aesthetically. So before we decide on that direction, I want to turn it over to Steve Horton, who will go walk us through the latest financials.
Mr. Chairman,
and funding plan.
just so I understand, so you say there's 3 options. First option is we do use the higher budget. Then you said we can save $3 million off the higher budget from what you've done.
I anticipate us being able to save $3 million.
Option 2 is $8 million, which is $3 million less than that. So aren't option 1 and 2 the same?
They're very similar, yeah, but 8 million is a more concrete, like, that is what we will have to do to hit the 8 million.
Right.
There's some VE items that are right now in flux and we want to vet it through the airport to make sure they're okay with it, but then there's.
So my question is if what we're doing right now, you think there's gonna be a $3 million savings, then option 2 is a $3 million savings. Will option 2 be a $6 million savings?
Oh, no, it won't, yeah, sorry.
So then option 2 and option 1 are the same?
Yeah.
Or is there a difference?
There's a couple things that are about in the $2 million range that I think are like kind of on teetering on the top on whether we go one way or the other.
So option 2 is probably more than a $3 million reduction. You're saying option 1 is a $3 million reduction. Option 2, there's other things that you're going to change.
Yes.
So option 2, so when you say that's an $8 million increase or a $3 million reduction, that's not correct.
Yeah, you're right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I think my takeaway from that is really, I think I'm comfortable, I think we can hit 8 million comfortably, but so there are some things under the 8 million that we're still looking at where we might be able to keep those in.
Yeah, well, these aren't they're not clear options. So
Sorry about that.
again, just so I'm clear, the first option, you think we potentially could save $3 million in the first option.
yes.
Okay.
So would it be
So
better
then
to
that
say
would
the first
equal-
option is a 9 million increase?
Yeah, there's some aesthetic things that we wanted to bring to the table to the airport on the 12 million thing, 12 million.
I don't wanna get wrapped up in the details, but I just don't wanna wrap my head around that.
Okay,
Yeah, so the option one would probably be 9 million increase, option two would be 8 million, potentially more,
yes,
potentially less.
So, yeah, just so to keep things moving, if we can go to the next slide for Steve, he can put together what he has found for the, an update on the funding plan.
That's this one.
Steve, you want?
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Can everyone hear my voice well?
Yes.
Great. I've gone off camera because I need the bandwidth. I'm actually speaking to you from a hotel room. So good morning. Good to speak to you again. I know we have limited time, so I'm going to go quickly to try to get to the bottom line and not spend that much time on the slides. I think it was mentioned a little earlier, you recall last fall about the same time, we reviewed the financial feasibility of the terminal area study and concluded that the financial feasibility of implementing the terminal expansion as well as the non-terminal CIP that was available at that time was very, very strong. It was a very strong financial feasibility question, very fundable, and a solid, prudent financial plan to go forward to expand the terminal. Our scope during the design effort is to update the financial plan that we reviewed last fall with the cost updates as they become available. The first was the schematic design, which is about 30% design. The design development level is about 60%, and we have updated the terminal financial schedules to include those numbers. We actually got these numbers last week. We've got the value engineering potentials this week, and we got the latest costs on some of the non-terminal projects actually late yesterday afternoon. Our conclusion with this update, however, shows significant financial stress, unlike the last update that we talked with you last fall on. And it's really not because of these terminal budget increase or potential increases. It's because of changes in the non-terminal capital projects. There have been quite a few of them. Let's skip this slide and go to the third slide, Jeremy. The key question here for what stress is caused, let's go to the previous slide, Darren, is why do we have to consider non-terminal projects in the CIP? And the reason is they use up funding sources that need to be available for the terminal expansion. And the problem with some of those non-terminal projects is they have higher funding priority with the FAA. And so those projects must be dealt with first before we are able to apply some of those FAA funding sources to the terminal project. For example, there's not too many pavement projects on the airfield, if any, that don't have a higher priority than the terminal project. There are also projects that deal with safety, deal with security, and deal with environmental issues, and they tend to have higher priority. So we have to account for those. Those have to be handled before we apply the available funding sources to the terminal. Secondly, in non-terminal projects, there are some that have urgent implementation needs. We've got at least 2 aircraft parking areas, aprons and pavement areas that are in not good shape at all and need to be dealt with and can't be put off too much longer. And consequently, available funding has got to be applied to some of those projects in front of the terminal project. So those items, the non-terminal items, are really what's causing the stress. In additional, I know it's not a small amount of money, but 8 million, 12 million, whatever the budget increase may be, it may be not at all, is not remotely as costly as some of these other non-projects. Let's go to the detailed schedule, Darren, that you just had up. This I would refer to as a detailed summary. That sounds like a conflict, but you can look at the schedule and say, yes, that's detailed. But this represents and summarizes about 20 pages worth of schedule that look just like this. Getting straight to the bottom line and evaluating the financial feasibility of the current financial plan, we look at those 3 lines in the middle of the schedule, the pink line and the 2 blue lines. And the statistics and the measures that we look at to evaluate financial feasibility are first, what is the minimum unrestricted cash balance on an annual basis that this schedule represents. And you can see those numbers range. They range widely. In 2024, the balance is all the way up to $60 million. That's because there's debt proceeds that are added into the schedule and they're not spent yet. They eventually get spent. But the bottom point is 1.8 million, which occurs in 2026. That is an extreme stressful level of cash reserves, unlike any we saw in the financial plan that we evaluated last fall. To go along with that cash balance, we also look at days cash on hand. And the recommendation that your finance advisor, Baker Tilly, has made is you need to maintain about 800 days of cash on hand. That's about 3.5 years. And if you look at 2026, that number drops all the way down to 63 days. I wouldn't think that would be acceptable. And the decision would have to be made, is there a willingness to take the risk that it would take to get the cash down to that particular level. In the next year of 2027, it increases quite a bit up to 222 days, less than a year. It still doesn't hit your financial advisor's recommendation of 800 days. We don't get to 800 days until 2031 when the project is well completed. So that is the financial stress that we're dealing with in this updated financial plan. The debt service coverage, in spite of the increased debt that we're looking to incur, is in fairly good shape. Our bottom line rule of thumb for what a minimum is about 1.5 debt service coverage, which is the revenue available to pay debt service, is 50% more than that debt service. So getting right to the bottom line, that's our feasibility conclusion as it's represented in those 3 lines. Are there any questions about the result that comes from that?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, so I guess my first question really is we should decide what an appropriate reserve is. And part of our discussion was maintaining a huge cash balance, and we're getting input from the city. So I guess I'd like to drill down on that first of all. And, realistically, do we need 2.5 years of all the cash we can possibly have? Do we need $23 million in this reserve all the time? So I think that's the first question, and I guess what I would do is I would probably look to similar airports, and I'd ask you really what is their ongoing reserve, where they're again have a mill levy and are taxing, what is that standard? And I know we had this discussion before.
Well, there really isn't a standard. I don't see 800 days at other airports, but the range is going to be in the neighborhood, if it can be afforded in small hubs. You're a small hub, can afford to have a cash balance anywhere from a year to 2 years cash balance. And so that would be 365 to twice that. So 800 days, yes, it's higher than we've seen. So, I mean, that's a standard, and it is policy. And so the board would need to decide what is that policy. Some airports do that on a formal basis and pass a resolution that indicates we will not go below a certain number, and other airports do it informally, which gives them more flexibility in dealing with unexpected situations when they come up. So there isn't a standard answer, but clearly 63 days is too low, and I would say 800 days is higher than I've seen at other airports.
So let's not drill into that right now, but I think part of what you need for a reserve depends on what your cash flow is, what your capital projects are, and there's a lot more input to that question than just how many days reserve. But just get back to your point here. If we did a 1 year reserve, that'd be about $10 million. And you're saying we're down to 1.8 here, so we need another 8.2 million. So my question is, if we borrowed another 8.2 million, I'm assuming our debt coverage ratio would still be above 1.5. So would that ease the stress that you're talking about there?
It probably would, but I'm not sure I would borrow more money to solve a short-term cash flow problem like that. There's already significant debt, more debt than, from what I understand, the airport has never had before.
Yeah, and I understand. I just want to be clear that you're saying that the debt coverage ratio of 1.5 would be, again, kind of that standard.
Rick, what we're seeing from Bank of North Dakota in their request is 1.1.
Right.
Not 1.5. So.
Well, and maybe my point here is really, we have to determine how much debt we're going to put on these projects, which, the way you put this together is really talking about using cash for everything as much as we can. And so, again, I'll quit asking questions, but my interest really probably relates to something that's coming up next, and that's really what's the cash flow on this when we get all this done.
Well, this schedule tells you what that cash flow is.
Well, Steve,
and it doesn't just look at it's important not only to look at the terminal cash flow, but it's important to look at the cash flow that's going to be required for the non-terminal projects, some of which have a higher priority than the terminal as far as the FAA is concerned, and as far as condition of some of these payments that need to be dealt with very soon.
Steve, you made the comment that the airport's never had this type of debt. This is a generational project with the terminal and the things that we're doing. So that comparison to me is a little bit faulty at this point. But and this is why I wish we would have had this a little bit longer to look at and to try and understand. But what Mr. Berg is pointing out is that there's some things here we need to understand, and there's assumptions on the backside. This assumes no construction interim financing is used. This is all just existing cash at this point and operating revenues. Are we doing construction financing at all?
No, it doesn't rely on just cash. First of all, one success story we have, and I think we've got.
Hold on before we go to that. Does it include a construction financing package at all?
No, it does not.
So we're doing this all cash out of pocket.
This analysis assumes $40 million from the Bank of North Dakota and $39 million of debt for the parking ramp.
Okay. Yeah, and
And
the
what I was
proceeds,
going to say,
well, I'm a little
what I was
confused.
going to say,
The Prairie Dog, or the legacy funds looks to be 15 million.
No, it's on two lines. One line for $25 million, which is the PSC portion that'll be paid for PSCs. $15 million for the portion funded by the airport.
Why is it split that way?
Because we anticipated I'm sorry, Steve, to interrupt. Since the $40 million can be drawn down as it's needed, we didn't think that you would need, first of all, we didn't think you need the $40 million in the first year. So just for simplicity of some calculations, we showed that you pull the $15 million in 2024 to get you going, and then the PSC portion could wait until the following year, and you wouldn't need to draw it until the following year.
And if
well,
you-
and another
if you
key
do-
issue
no,
related to that is
Hold on,
a PSC
Hold on, Steve. Hold on,
cannot be
Steve.
used as security.
hold on, Steve. Back to the 40 million. If we drew the full 40 million down, what's that do to your cash flow analysis, immediately?
Well, first of all, I don't believe you can draw the 40 million down. It's based on draws to meet expenditures that are required.
Okay, well, let's not
It's
speculate on that.
It's not like the
If you-
standard revenue bond.
Steve, let's not speculate on that right now. This is the problem with trying to do these, day up. Has this been shared with anybody, prior to this meeting?
Not this schedule, because we didn't have the information we needed completely in order to prepare this schedule until late Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, so a lot of when we're doing modeling like this are just what if questions. And so rather than eliminate a what if question, if we had 40 million drawn down from the state funds immediately, what's that do to the cash flow?
All that would do, John, so if you see that pink line that says in 2024, there's 60 million at the end of the year, and in 2025, there's 53 million. All that would do would be to move $25 million earlier into 2024. It does not fix
That's our payment.
the 2026 for being down to 1.8 million.
Okay. What, and this is like I said,
And so our
what are
cash
we
flow
using on
after
our
service is
revenue
6
projections?
million.
Because I know when we did this 3-4 months ago, there was a lot of differentiation in our assumptions on our revenues and timing and stuff. Do you have a schedule of that?
Stuff is grants too.
Yes, we have detailed schedules for everything, and the revenue assumptions are based on the most recent budget information that we
Well, that's
have.
the 40.
The revenue information related to the parking ramp is based on what the parking experts have provided, and we've used those numbers. We're not the parking experts. We've used the numbers that were provided, and they do show additional incremental revenue based on the parking ramp. And as was noted earlier, for this budget, parking revenues on the existing facilities have grown dramatically, and those are reflected within this financial plan.
Okay, well, again, it would be good to see that, because last time we kind of worked with this exercise, we never did come to agreement on parking revenues. That, if you remember, SP Plus had projected parking revenues less than, had actually occurred in increases over time, so there's some real confusion there, and I was wondering which of those you used and who was part of this whole discussion?
We used the last schedule that we were provided, and I definitely remember that and acknowledge that there was confusion. There didn't seem to me to be a conclusion among all the parties involved about what those additional revenues would be. We used the last numbers that were provided. We didn't do the projection related to the incremental revenues related to the new parking ramp. We used the numbers that we had available.
Okay.
And so those are the numbers that are projected.
Steve, going to those numbers, would that significantly impact this cash flow schedule we're looking at today?
Well, they could, if we have a different estimate and it's more or less, yes, it would impact. I don't think it would impact it significantly. If some of those numbers doubled, you might add $2 or $3 million. So you take 1.8 million and add 2 or 3 million, you're still under the recommendations for what's your year-end cash flow balance sheet.
Right, but as Mr. Berg pointed out, if all we're trying to do is hit a cash number of cash on hand, there are times during construction projects where you will spend down dollars and replace those over time. And at the same time, if we wanted to hit that, I wouldn't advocate for this, but it could be done by moving borrowing forward.
Well, you could. Frankly, I would not recommend it.
No,
I would not
I'm
recommend borrowing to fix this problem.
Steve, I'm not recommending this, I'm saying, these are the
Okay.
level of discussions that we have to have as we move back and forth. But when we see a presentation like this, and we have sort of a showstopper in 2026, it says you only have 1.8 million, that's disastrous, can't recommend it. There are other ways to look at this and to work with it. So I'm a little concerned, like I said, when we get this dumped on us at a meeting without, some very serious discussion. In our discussion so far, you've already said that there's things that you've assumed in there that could change, that change the results. You're taking a revenue number that was disputed 3 months ago, never settled, and again, placing that into this. So to me, this should have a big draft right through it, and we need to spend time and understand the assumptions in back of this, and agree on those. And so I appreciate the work that's done here, but this is not a final finished product. This is a draft in any way, shape, or form. And I think we have to be very careful in presenting this as it's being presented today.
We would be happy to use whatever agreed upon or whatever available numbers there are related to revenues in the parking grant. We are completely satisfied with the budget and with the projections we have for every other revenue that's here, every single one.
Mr. Chair?
So the only revenue projections that need updating are I think those that you pointed out, and those are related to what happens with parking revenues once the parking ramp is completed.
Mr. Chair,
So we totally agree with that.
didn't we agree on 25 a day and 70%?
I don't know what numbers they used here.
Talking about parking.
Yeah, 25 a day, I thought we all agreed on that.
But we're looking at this right now, we don't know, I don't know what numbers. I think Steve's saying he's using whatever SP Plus produced at the last point, which I don't know if it was 25 a day.
Yeah, well, and I think that was, again, maybe the question to you, Steve, is so just so I'm clear, you're saying that the parking ramp is a problem here. And if so, the question is, we want to know why and what are the assumptions you're using on that? Because we debated that as the airport authority and said, okay, here's the assumptions we feel comfortable with. So the actual assumptions should not be an issue. You know, who knows what it's really gonna be, but that's what we want this based on.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we agreed on 20. Mr. Chair.
Some key assumptions, I won't get down to the numbers, but key assumptions related, just talking about the parking ramp, the revenues are whatever were provided, and there were some additional expenses, and I believe they were netted out, or whatever were provided at the time. I think this goes all the way back to June. So those are the only numbers we have, and those are the numbers that we've used. Some key assumptions relating to what impacts cash flow and debt service coverage and these ending their balances are the assumption, and I don't think the decision's been finally made. I don't know what the decision will be, but on the parking ramp, the assumption we're going with is that the airport will pay cash for the design, which is about $3.5 million, and that the city would borrow $39 million, but the airport would cash flow the debt service. So in effect, even though the airport's not issuing the debt, the airport is taking that on that additional $30 million debt. Now, regarding the Bank of North Dakota loan, I have never seen in 30 years more favorable terms on a loan than Bank of North Dakota provides because of its situation being the only state-owned bank in the country. It's a fantastic loan program. Very favorable. It can be paid off at any time. There's no penalties, a 2% interest rate. You don't have to borrow the entire amount like you do typically with a revenue bond. You just draw what you need to pay expenses as they come in. I've never seen a better loan than this. I have no idea what the rate structure will be.
So
Steve, just a moment there.
So really, not to get in the weeds anymore, but what is your recommendation here with what the information that you provided us? What are you recommending we should do?
Well, I say be cautious, and I say you need to do something to keep this cash balance to go as low as 1.8 million. And the typical answers to how do you fix this are: one, you find alternative funding sources. That's going to be very difficult. Two, you delay projects. Some of those that may not be possible for many of them. And three, you phase projects that may not also be possible. And four, you completely cancel a project. Those are not good options. But that could be what you would face with. If some event comes up that causes an unanticipated large cash drain in 2026, we would be in trouble.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so you're saying find alternative funding sources, delay the projects, cancel the projects. What was the third one?
Phase the projects.
Steve, I think your recommendation is a little premature here without looking.
Well, I think so too.
Okay. Without looking at the parking revenues. And Mr. Ingham was trying to point out that we did provide the assumptions on that piece of the project. And I'm wondering if those are the revenues that you used.
We used revenues that were provided they weren't spreadsheets, they were PDFs. We used those revenues because it was the only numbers we had.
Okay.
And that was the IPAS format.
Okay, and without seeing them, I guess the assumptions that the authority used was, Mr. Ingham, what were the amounts?
$25 a day, 70% occupancy, with a 3-year wash away of the erosion of the other parking. Where we cannibalized other parking, we washed that away in 3 years.
Interest rate was 5.25%. That was on that iDaily
Yep.
spreadsheet.
So are those the assumptions that underlie the revenue there, Steve?
I don't know about the individual parking rates. We had a schedule that showed revenues and didn't show individual rates for parking spaces. I think that PDF schedule we had just reflected whatever those other assumptions were. We didn't get into those details. We took the numbers that demonstrated what the end result increased revenues would be,
Okay.
as well as what the debt service would be.
So before we get into any recommendations, we do need to go back and sync that up at this point. What interest rate and what term were you using on the debt financing? Other than.
Well, we used the interest rate that we derived from the numbers they provided us, and that was 5.25%.
It's gotta be that iDaily sheet.
And I think
Yeah, well, and again, you've been put in contact with Baker Tilly. Have they given you? You haven't?
No, they haven't given us anything. We saw the email last week from Baker Tilly indicating they would send out an invite to talk about, I'm not sure, structure of the debt, and we haven't seen that yet.
Okay, so your debt structure you're using here is from who?
Is from what? I'll tell you the truth, I don't know. The debt structure was on the schedules that were provided. I understand it may have been iDaily or Baker Tilly. I don't know which one.
All right, we spent quite a bit of time here on this. I think.
Monica, are you there?
We need to have a little more input into this. I would appreciate this being marked draft at this point. And, yeah.
I think it might help, could you put together sources and uses for the terminal expansion and the parking? I think that would clarify a lot. And then I think, you know, this overall cash flow is good, but we're in a difficult environment because we have these capital projects and then we've got just what's our basic cash flow. And if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, but I think that would be helpful.
We will do that.
Okay.
Now, will you engage the parking experts that you used before to come to a conclusion about what the incremental parking revenue should be?
Yeah, I think staff has that.
Yeah, Greg is on, so if there's any updates, Greg Pearson can provide. That June spreadsheet is gonna be updated.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I did forward out the most recent update, which included those assumptions that were just spoken of. The only adjustment we made on the last iteration was to adjust the bond rate to 5.25%. So I think that was sent out maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago.
I haven't seen it.
Are you doing the bond debt schedule? Greg?
Is that for me, John?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We got two.
No, it's buried into the cost just from the standpoint of, figuring out the net cash flow. So we just adjusted it from 5.5. We had it initially set at 5.5 and we were directed that it would be possibly 5.25. So we just made that adjustment.
Well, and, the interest rate environment now it's gonna be bouncing around, so we might have to do some sensitivity analysis. It could be as low as 4%, it could go up to 6%. It's gonna bounce around during this whole time. But you use the $25 a day, the 70% occupancy, and the cannibalization. I can't remember what that figure was for a 3-year period. Is that the revenue that you're providing now?
if those numbers are the numbers that we were last given once the board decided, you know, this is the assumptions that we wanted to use, and yes, the only reason I'm saying that with caution is, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was the direction given to us by the board as those assumptions were passed out, and so that should be the last iteration that we sent. The only modification that was needed on that last version was the 5.25% for the bond rate, which we did make that adjustment as well. But I can go back and double check and make sure the numbers that you just spoke were in that model.
But as we went through that, where we last left this is that the projections you had on parking revenue, we were exceeding this year beyond what you had projected for revenues 2 years into the future. Did we adjust that?
We did. We had a call, we had a couple calls, and we decided and looked at it again, and I think there was caution that we were not gonna get up to that, and then at some point, what do? We would run out of parking spaces, but at the same time, and then this was also shared in the most recent email with that most recent model, we are actually on track to either meet or exceed the year one revenue forecast for this year, and this is 2023 obviously, and this wasn't based off of 2023.
Greg, that's what I'm concerned about as we look at the schedule put together by Leibowitz, is we had severely missed our projections. Like I said, we had parking revenue projections that in this year, 2023, we were exceeding the projections that we were using for 2025. And so when we look at this cash
I
flow,
want to say it was 4 million, 4.5, somewhere in that range. And through August, we are already beyond 4.5. And so I think our last model showed 6.2. Which again, we may not hit 6.2 this year, but we will be pretty close when you consider all the other revenue sources. Now, in their defense, there was some revenue sources that were not considered, such as reservations and other things of that nature. So that speaks to why the number may have been a little lower than expected. So we tried to find
not by $1 million.
Somewhere between the 4.5 and the 6.2. Where do we land? So
well, and Greg, going forward, if we end up this year and as we look at our interim financials, I think 6.2 is attainable this year. What's that do for our projection next year of 6.7? And when we're off on our base year, especially over a multi-year model, the error compounds throughout our whole model. And so I think we need to be really, really careful at this point.
Couple questions. Say, Greg, can you clarify, so the revenue projections you're doing, are they July 1 to June 30, or are they calendar year?
Calendar year. So through August, which I don't think you've received the August numbers yet.
Okay. And then when our group met here a couple weeks ago in the kickoff meeting for the parking garage with Stroh and Walker, Steve Fromming was here, and the McGough group, they talked about potentially taking out of service 500 spaces. That'd be the entire short-term lot and some in the north half of the long-term lot. It was 500 spaces, so I don't know what the revenue loss projections would be on that during construction.
Right, so when we did the model, it was obviously based off of the current, space counts and capacity that we have. But to your point, Sean, during the project, we would definitely have to either pivot and figure out another way to park or replace those spaces. Sioux Falls is dealing with that right now. They lost their entire short term.
Greg,
but there's other ways to kind of pick up some of that as well with valet and so forth.
Greg, hang on a second here, we have a question.
The lady who is continuing carrying on a conversation with somebody else, would you please mute your?
Oh, so somebody's got to mute their phone. Sorry. We're picking up some background.
Or turn it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me this there? Okay. So Greg, if you can send out that updated, I'll have to go back through and see where the updated June was, just to review it and then resend that out to the group here.
And Sean, just as we do this, we talked about this, there will be a one-time hit on parking revenue.
Yes.
But we can't take that one-time hit and then project it forward based on that lower amount.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful about that. The one-time hit on parking will be a fixed cost of the project and should be amortized over the long term. So, at this point, Paul, you have a question?
I was just gonna go back to, we project that we'll lose money on the parking revenues because we'll lose those short-term spots.
Yeah.
And to your point of how could we still serve our employees and yet maybe utilize in a very advantageous cash generating method to still offer our travelers some short-term parking by maybe even temporarily moving some of the employees to a lot that's still walkable and still works with the security, but maybe we can generate or recoup some of that lost revenue.
Absolutely, I think,
And that requires a lot of looking at, you know, the different employee groups, how many parking passes we have, how would we relocate that? How could we do that? But Greg, I think that's where we could use your assistance.
Right, and Sean and I have been, you know, talking about a couple options of trying to figure out how to plug that hole, if you will, and also make sure that we're providing that passenger experience when it comes to parking during this process, to make sure that, you know, the passenger is still within a recent or decent proximity to the airport, if you will, the terminal building.
So hopefully a mutually acceptable
Should be countywide tax.
but financially advantageous solution.
well, and if we're talking about moving employees versus customers, employees have set work schedules, so we could even consider shuttles for employees with remote parking. So a number of options become available there. I think we just need to be creative. If we get city bus service, John, that would really be special.
Electric buses.
Yeah, but, all right, we need to find a way forward with this. My recommendation is that this be looked at as a draft, and let's get these numbers a little more refined before we run off and make recommendations that we would change this project dramatically because of an anticipated cash balance in 2026, when we know we've got some critical assumptions that drive those numbers. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
this does bode for giving this to the city, even with the current numbers, and quite a justification for one more mill. I know this has come and gone for 2023, but very motivating for 2024 and beyond.
You know, I don't think that at this point we have a draft document here.
No, I understand, but it relieves the problem. It relieves the problem and gives a buy-in. Now, whether that's citywide or countywide, might be another conversation we have.
Rick, I don't think we wanna, until we've got agreement on what these revenues should be and what we've agreed to, I think we need to be careful with this at this point. You know, the statement, yes, it's true that this will be more debt than the airport has ever looked at, but we need the numbers right before we start sending this up. The mill levy's been set for the year.
No, I understand that, but many of the problems are we don't talk about it early enough, and I think this is where you start talking about that early enough with the city and the county.
Let's get the numbers so we can ground for.
Steve? Oh,
Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of the meeting, Sean mentioned current rental rates or parking rates maybe going up $1. Is that?
That's just my recommendation.
I think that needs to be heard too and vetted into this. I agree that that's a good consideration, and that could really affect your numbers too if you did that basic increase in daily parking now.
Greg, I don't know if you're on, I just had, my opinion, my recommendation was to increase our short-term rate from 19 to something greater in
Yeah,
2021, but.
It's definitely industry standard to at least review it on an annual basis, and you're coming up on, you know, the anniversary of your last increase, which was October 1 of last year. I did prepare and provide Sean with a rate analysis and a recommendation, if you will, just that looked at that typically when you pair it or time it with any improvements associated with the airport, it really goes unnoticed, to be honest with you, just because passengers see it as a cost of travel, and the fact of the matter is they feel that they're getting something of value in return. So that definitely would move the needle. You saw how much it moved the needle last year, looking at September of 2022 against October of 2022 when the rates were raised. So that's definitely something we would at least encourage you to consider.
When did you send that?
And I can share that rate analysis with the board,
When did you send
through
that?
emails, however you want. I'm sorry,
When did you send that? I recall
when did I send it?
Yeah. I recall saying that. But anyway, just send it out
It was
again.
21.
Is that something,
Yeah, it was a Excel sheet, maybe in July, but I can pull it back up and send it over.
is that something Leibowitz and Horton can use to update their spreadsheet?
The board would have to approve an increase before that. So,
Steve?
Yes.
Steve, I just have a request as you put this together again and indicate that it's a draft. And I see that you've got the date on it, but could you also include your credentials, the company that's preparing, and also like the numbers that we're using to figure this out, to tabulate all the totals. So confirm the parking revenue, have that included, so that we know what information all the numbers are being derived from.
We can do that. As I mentioned earlier, there are maybe 20 schedules that support this particular schedule, and they're all very detailed. So all those numbers are there in detail. And I agree with Chair. We need to look at, we need to get an update and get some financial projections for the revenues on the parking garage. I'm satisfied that we have a reasonable projection for the parking revenues based on no ramp, but we don't have the numbers when a ramp is added. So that's the only number in here that I'm not satisfied with is a good projection. But we'll do as you suggest.
Steve, I think the other thing that we need to do is go back through, and we're anticipating various grant funding sources and what would qualify, what wouldn't qualify. I believe we need to go back through and kind of audit that whole process to see if there's any other funds that become available. And you bring up a point on the walkway. Is that assuming any eligible grant funding on the walkway?
But the walkway would be eligible, but it's not relevant because there's not enough funding. We've used up every dime of funding that is available.
Right,
So,
again, we aren't, we're gonna continue to look until it's no longer feasible, but if it is eligible, we've got some work to do to understand. How would we make it eligible? As you said, if we're gonna start talking about phasing, not suggesting this is the way to go, but if you're saying we've used up our eligibility in a certain pot of dollars, maybe that becomes a project a year from now or 2 years from now. And so those are the creative ways that I think we need to come at this. And with this identification, and as Mr. Berg's asked, a source and use statement will allow us to look at this from all angles.
Well, I just have to say, we've already done, as part of our scope and our expertise, to evaluate the feasibility of all the projects, not just terminal projects, but also the CIP. We have done that analysis, and we're satisfied it is accurate. It's not the eligibility that's run out. It's the funds that are generated by whichever source they are The entitlement funds are based on a formula. There's some other funds that are based on formulas that you earn. And then there are discretionary funds, which,
Correct, Steve,
the
and
financial team
I'm
plans
not,
to go off.
I'm
of,
not
but some of those
suggesting,
issues are
Steve,
you have to
hang
be
on,
politically driven.
Steve, hang on a second. I'm not suggesting that you haven't done your job, but as you pointed out, we found a unique financing source in the Bank of North Dakota money. We just need to go through that process and identify all the potential items that become available. And again, not saying you haven't done that, but you would have had no way of knowing about Bank of North Dakota infrastructure funding. Prairie dog funds are in here. Prairie dog funds may or may not become available. There's different sources, and I'm just saying we have to run all those to ground. So we've spent way more time on this than we should. I think what we need to do is to take these discussion items that we have, revise this, and put it on the agenda for our next meeting. Steve, I would ask that these materials be distributed at least 2 days before our meeting, and that we take it up at that point.
That was more on me. Yep. I'll let you read that.
Okay. All right, is there any other discussion, comments, suggestions?
No, just another comment afterwards.
Okay.
You still have some more things, correct?
Yeah, I just, if you guys, with the information given, I know it's a lot to process, so ideally, if you could, and whether it goes to the next board meeting, but a decision on the budget helps us keep the design going and hit our milestones that we have. We have a bid package going out in November, which would be affected by these budget decisions.
Brandon, could you email us the presentation?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll correct the assumptions that we made there. So it's a 9-8 and then maintain.
Since we've got you here, is there any other updates or?
Yeah, this is always a hard conversation, talking about money and budget differences, especially if it's over. But the design is going great, and we're reaching out to vendors, getting details. We'll have a next round of listening sessions with user groups, and that'll be dialing in really the details on what they want, and with electrical and mechanical requirements for that. And then concessions, we're plodding along with them. They don't have anybody locked in yet. They talked about, Schlotzsky's. They've been referring to Schlotzsky as like the grab and go, but Skydyne and Dustin, they're talking to local restaurants and also other franchises to occupy those spaces. So we're moving along.
I have one quick question one thing that I don't remember seeing in the slide-through presentation was how that we are gonna transition from, like, currently with the gates down for the TSA, for that domed area, like all the natural light comes in, what kind of partition will there be, since that will no longer be a segue to, you know what I mean, the restaurant, food and beverage will be on the other side,
Yeah.
so what kind of material will be used in between?
Yeah, we do have a glass storefront there, so as you come up the grand stair, you would be looking right through to the departure lounges, the restaurant, the activity on the other side.
Okay, alright, so we can see.
I'll see if we can get a rendering or image of that, so
Okay.
you can see it.
Alright.
Great.
Okay, alright, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just kind of in the big picture, I think this is a tremendously frustrating hour and a half we just went through. And I just perceive us continuing to do this twice a month for an hour and a half is a tremendous, be really frustrating. So I think what I see as a challenge here is some of this stuff needs to be put in plain English. And so then as a board, we know what decisions we need to make or not. And so I don't know how we get to that point, but one of the thoughts that I had is if maybe this is something just on these financials, that we have a little temporary subcommittee that kind of gets us all in a way that we all understand. And I'd be willing to put extra time outside of this meeting just to go through that, because this is a, you know, like you said, it's a legacy project, it's a huge project. None of us want to put the airport in any jeopardy at all, but we've got to get this together rather quickly. It seems like, so anyway, I would just throw that out as a suggestion. I'd be willing to.
Thank you.
Anybody else wanna?
I'll join you.
What's that?
I'll join you.
Oh,
All right, we'll do that as just an informal action going forward. But-
9:26 a.m.
All right, you wanna just receive and file the report from Mead and Hunt and read what's important? Motion to do that, please.
so move.
Second?
Second.
And just noting the changes and corrections that we asked, I'd say through the next iteration of that process. All those in favor, I say aye.
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 Hold the same sign. Okay. Item number 6, and this is great. This is $2,365,000 for the parking structure architectural fee contract, which is less than the $2.5 million that we have in the projections. So we're going the right direction here. Do we have any discussion about that? Any questions?
Well, the question, Mr. Chairman, is how is that arrived at?
It's a
Is there anyone
percentage
here
of-
from Stroh?
Yeah, we could hear.
He's traveling, I don't know that
It's a
anyone is on.
yeah, typically percentage of the estimated construction costs. It's typical billing structure on those type of soft costs.
Has he done parking structures before?
Yes. I
I think he has a consultant, working with them that specializes in parking structures.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, what's happened is Walker put the big design together, has partnered with Stroh and partnered with Higher Engineering for the structure. And again, I don't know anything about parking garage construction, but I guess I'm just, I would like to know how they arrived at that number. So, and it's,
Would you like to delay this until?
if we could, yeah.
Okay. We'll just entertain a motion to move item 6 to the next agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying
Aye.
Aye.
All same sign. Okay, communications from the Arts Partnership.
Tanya wasn't able to make it today, but this is the annual request for the board's participation in the Arts Partnership program here. Music and the arts, $6,500 from the board. Is that up from 5,000, John? So this is the same last year. So this is to keep that program going. We get a lot of positive feedback and attention from the Arts Partnership in their efforts here. So I'd recommend that you approve their $6,500 request
One,
next year.
one thing that I would, like to just comment on is, I think it's in here. They've got the visual, it's the vinyl exhibit reproductions, and I'd like to see, instead of a reproduction, like the original work, instead of, you know, over the, it almost, like, I just think we could showcase the art better in a, instead of doing a vinyl reproduction.
So the original work is out here at the baggage claim, and then the production, that's a matter of the artists wanting their work so they can sell it, so it's never available.
Okay.
Once the display is done, they go back to their own studios with the actuals. The actuals out there. I just don't see how that would work, because
Yeah, I mean,
they're always for sale.
Horse downstairs, you know, Brian to put up, so it kind of continues on, just to show them that it gets replaced after, I mean, they go on top of the other line every quarter. Yeah, so it's every quarter they kind of continue on.
But some of the artists have had pieces of work sold that they're on display at the airport, so as soon as they take it on, go to the buyer.
I would just love the opportunity to visit with them and think, how can we make it look more art-like and less like another advertisement?
Would you wanna reach out to them and have that conversation?
Sure, I can.
Okay. Alright. So do we have a motion to approve the communication of the agreement with the Arts Partnership?
Motion.
Second.
And Paul, you're gonna reach out to them in that discussion. Alright. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We have special assessment notices on streetlights and North University Drive reconstruction.
Stacy, are you still on? So do you want to just update what the status of the deferrals?
Sure. So the airport received 2 different special assessment notices. On August 17, one related to the reconstruction project on North University to, I believe, the Red River, and then the streetlight project, which would purportedly be on airport property. So I sent a letter to Dan Hart on the date that they had their special assessment meeting, indicating we're looking for deferrals on both. And I have followed up with Nancy Morris. We have not been able to connect as of yet. But essentially, for those 2 projects, sort of as a whole, we would be looking for deferrals. There may be some portions that wouldn't receive it, like the Air National Guard, their ingress and egress on South University there. So that's pending, and I will follow up. Basically, Nancy said she would meet with Dan Eberhard and get their hands around it and then get back to me. So I will follow up again. The next hearing in front of the City Commission, I believe, is October 3, and Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's correct. I know Commissioner Strand, we had talked about this during part of the MOU discussions and so forth, that when North University was reconstructed, the FAA wouldn't allow us to pay the special assessments in areas that can't be developed. It's kind of ironic, but we have some other deferrals in place because of the FAA policy on this. So I believe this will ultimately go to the Finance Committee for approval. There may be a portion of the streetlights on 40th Avenue North between Old 81 and the river that could be paid. And we're trying to get Dan to assess the new National Guard Operational Readiness Center property, like they do the Armed Forces Reserve Center. They have their own special assessment notice. It comes to us, we convey it to the National Guard Bureau for their payments. So there's still some work to do with Dan and his office there, but that's the direction that we're going.
Stacy, do you just want to tell us what happens on a deferral? Who then pays that cost that would have been assessed to the airport?
It's simply a deferral, so it's not reassessed to another landowner. There's simply usually a 20-year deferral before it's looked at again. So as far as I understand it, there's no reallocation specials to adjacent landowners.
Okay, but it's not paid. So 20 years from
Correct, it's not paid.
20 years from now, the airport's gonna ask for another deferral, correct?
As long as it ends up not being an immediate benefit to the airport and or impedes pursuant to the FAA incoming and outgoing aircraft.
No, it just, the point being that it's deferred, but the cost is still there to somebody, not the airport.
Correct. Correct.
All right. Do we have a motion to receive the special assessment notices and I guess request the deferral of this?
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, item number 9, South Perimeter Road realignment project. No bids received. Looks like we have to do it ourselves. Who wants to volunteer?
Jeff, probably got the next 2 items. So the project was to extend the perimeter road directly north to the terminal taxi. Just this whole section here, yes, $160,000. The reason being is this is going to be shut down during the expansion of the terminal, so we have to extend that road up there. There were no bids.
So the intent was to get it done this fall in anticipation of McGuff starting in the spring with foundation work, because the foundation works will effectively take that east-west leg out of service. We sent an invite to bid out to Strata, Border States Paving, and Northern Improvement. Since the project was under $200,000, we didn't have to formally advertise it. Nobody responded, obviously, just because everyone's workload capacity is high, and people are scrambling to get work done before winter. So we'll rebid it in the springtime and just close the road for 2 or 3 weeks to get the work done and coordinate that with McGuff.
All right. Thank you.
You might advertise it then too.
Yeah.
We can
rebid it and you're not getting, but there's no.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have more time this spring to be able to do that. So.
Sorry.
No, good point. And the Bigman Engineering report, South Keating, what's that from?
Did all of you get a copy of this report? It was just a quick kind of technical memo that we have put together. So as you've heard, like Seaport talking, there's other capital improvements at the airport. So 2 of the worst pieces of pavement on the airfield, or the worst piece of pavement on the airfield, are both the existing terminal apron and the South General Aviation apron. They have pavement ratings of anywhere to 30 to 40, and the minimum threshold is I believe it's 65 or 70 on a scale of 0 to 100. So I mean they need to be reconstructed. And if you recall, me and Hunt had put a design together to reconstruct the South GD apron this summer 2023, and the FAA canceled that project because they want the airport authority to go through an environmental assessment. And then also the existing terminal apron, we can't start on this reconstruction until the terminal expansion is done, because we want to be able to take out the existing 5 gates on a phased approach and maintain service for travelers, that kind of thing. So and if you recall, we were starting on this terminal project back pre-COVID, and then COVID hit and just kind of pushed this down the road. So in the meantime,
Jeff, I don't understand what you just said.
okay.
Why can't we do this?
The existing terminal apron?
Yep.
Because there's only 5 gates right now, and just simply to construct it, you'd have to take a gate out of service. Then that impacts, it just strains the operational ability of the airport.
With our current schedule, we need 5 gates at all.
Correct. So once the terminal, obviously it is expanded, you have 9 gates available. Now you have more flexibility on systematically taking a gate out of service so you can get in there and construct the pavement.
Understand.
So, okay. So in the meantime, the pavement's disintegrating. So Sean was at the EEE conference in Denver, I believe it was, and there was a company out there that has its proprietary pavement rehabilitation product, and we had them come out and do a field visit. And there's 2 applications. One is just like a liquid application that it's called vitro fluid, and essentially what it does is just it's sprayed onto the surface and penetrates into the concrete and essentially glues the concrete back together, in theory. And all it does is it buys time until, it's not a cure-all, I'll say that, it just buys time to get to the point where the pavement can be reconstructed. And then there's another product called, Elephant Armor, which basically is a polymer concrete that fills all the voids. So that stuff is very expensive. It's probably $200 a cubic foot. So, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a recommendation for us?
Yes, the recommendation would be to apply the vitro fluid, and then on these areas in red shown on this technical memo, and then also do just a small area of the Elephant Armor, just to see how it performs here in Fargo before you would take it to the next level. And estimated cost for that is about $160,000.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve that.
Second.
With motion and second.
And these are just pictures of the terminal apron results. You can just to
You can keep
demonstrate.
going, but we're gonna pass this.
Okay.
You don't screw it up.
Okay.
Yeah. I rescind my motion.
Okay.
If you say another word.
It's a Band-Aid project.
Correct.
I just want to point out one of the things that's happening in the South J, and I think everyone knows this firsthand, is that the concrete continues to break off, so we have foreign object debris out there, and there's prop chips. We heard from Group 6, we heard from Sanford, we heard from the others, so this would be an attempt to try and put a Band-Aid on it for our customers.
Well, to Sean's point, when these jets are taxiing and they have a reverse beta, and you get one of these little pebbles in the engine, I mean, it destroys it. So it's a huge deal, especially here on our apron where we're trying to encourage more people, so.
Yeah, it's a liability.
But anyway.
Well, it's another point too that
All
we
of,
we can't do this.
sounds to me
without
like we have to have a FOD walk every day.
Yep, absolutely.
So, and so this all kind of plugs back into the terminal expansion also.
Correct.
All right, a motion to approve, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All same motion. Engineering services 24 to 28, we have another nice booklet.
We're required by the FAA to go out to solicit services for on-call airport engineering, environmental and planning services. So we did that public solicitation. And we had one response, which was Lee Hunt, and that's where I would recommend that you would award that maximum 5-year engagement with.
Motion to accept it.
Second.
We have motion and second, the only question I have, nothing against Mead and Hunt, but why do we only get one? Why does, maybe that's the unanswerable question, but,
I think others know how satisfied this board has been with them. They have partnered with Moore Engineering in this on some of the work. I guess you'd have to ask the other firms.
no, I know, I
Yeah.
just, it's,
Mr. Chair, I do understand, after being on the board 5 years, I do understand that the institutional knowledge of an airport and the things that have gone wrong that they've fixed is very valuable, and a new firm coming in would have to learn that very quickly, and it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, I mean, Mead and Hunt's done a great job for us, but I also agree with what the chairman said. We've got one architect that's been the same architect for the last 10 years. We've got one engineer that's been the engineer for the last 10 years. We've got one, contractor probably going forward. And so I'm just thinking from a policy standpoint, how do we ensure that we have checks and balances on that? I think that's our job. And I don't mean to debate that or anything. I'm just,
But years ago in '70, when we first started Airport Authority, it was Alteg Engineering. And they were here till the 90s, I think.
Until
So
just
from,
did everything, yeah.
they did everything.
all right. I have a motion to approve the award of the engineering services 2024 to 28. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Joan, I know this drives you crazy because you want roll call votes for spending money, but this is, I forgot to mention it, but
I was gonna bring that up as a point of order.
as long as we have unanimous votes, I think that will satisfy the requirement for that. If we do have dissenting votes, then we would go to roll call. So, just going forward. Lease agreement with Stuart Beckman.
Stuart is a employee of a current tenant in East Terminal, and he reached out to, I guess, Joan, and we in turn got a hold of Rick, who represents the East Terminal. He's just looking for a short-term use of one office up there, maybe for up to 4 months. Is that kind of where he's at?
Correct.
And Stacy put together just a very short-term lease agreement for him to do some personal work.
Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
We have motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Number 13, pickup truck, in state of North Dakota contract.
Motion.
Motion to approve, second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Great Lakes chapter of the AAAE Airports Conference, October 3 through 6. Motion to approve attendance.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Opposed, same sign. Number 15, the Air Show Convention, December 4th in Las Vegas. Motion to approve attendance.
Motion.
Second.
Second, motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Who's attending that one?
Who's attending now?
Myself, and then the air show committee.
Okay. And so we just pay for you, not the air show committee?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Item number 16, Aviation Issues Conference, Hawaii, registration only.
I think our board should go to that one.
I think we should schedule our meeting there.
A lot of board members do attend from around the country.
Motion.
We have a
Second.
motion and second, and who's attending that one again?
I'm attending as part of the national board for AAA, and then the AAA pays hotel and airfare.
No, glad to have you a member of that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And who wants to take 30 seconds and update construction and security?
That's what we got, Jeff.
Parking lot is open. Today they're gonna start in the last section of pavement repairs. So then we'll work towards finalizing that out. And then the North J is, there's really nothing to report on the section was really close. So yeah. Any questions on parking or North J, anything?
Nothing. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor signify by walking out the door.